This is NBC from studios at Richmond Hill in capital Kingstown on a beautiful Friday morning. It is the 16th day in the month of April 2021. Our time is now 6 minutes after the hour of 8 o'clock. And as promised this morning, Prime Minister Dr. the Honourable Ralph Gonsalves is back in studio with us. And joining us via Zoom is Professor Dr. Richard Robertson. Gentlemen, good morning and welcome.
Good morning. Good morning again, Richie.
Good morning, Prime Minister.
Okay, so Professor, good morning. We're happy to have you as always. And I know we had some action this morning, but before we even begin to talk about that, let's recap yesterday, because you left early yesterday to do some further investigation and sample collection. So if we can just get a brief update about what ensued then.
Yes, I mean, the days run into one, so I had to lose track sometimes. But yesterday we got the assistance of the Coast Guard boat to go along the west coast to do two things. One was to look at the deposits again. We didn't physically sample them. I wanted to get a better idea. The day before, I believe Dr. Christopher had gone and tried to do some gas measurements. He wasn't successful because how they do the gas measurements, you have to travel with the boat under where the gas is passing above head. So you have to travel under what we call the plume. And he went along the coast, and basically the plume was so wide that he couldn't get to the end of the plume before he got to Fancy. So it wasn't successful. You kind of have to start outside the plume, go under the plume, and then come outside the plume. And you end up with the data shows you a little hump where you could measure carbon dioxide. I'll come back to that. But one of the things that he had seen is the pyroclastic density currents along the coastline. And I went to him because I wanted to see it myself, to see where they had gone. You know, you could see pictures, but seeing the thing with your own eyes is different. And having him there to discuss what we were seeing is also very important, because, you know, one of the things that you do is bounce ideas across with each other. You know, it's part of the team effort that we have here. But so we saw the deposits. One of the interesting things is that we saw that he had said that he had seen deposits all the way up to Larrakai before the Snot. But we saw one in the valley next to it, which I might have the name wrong, but I think it's called Fanny, I think it's Fanny is called, the valley there. It's a small valley, but obviously a pyroclastic flow had come down. So one of the things that we got from that is that these flows are coming down all the time, more or less, and sometimes you don't see them from the observatory. And even in events that are not really very big, because they have gotten so far down already, it's easy for them to come down even without us seeing them. So one of the things that we'll have to do more routinely is go along the coast to see if there are any deposits. So that's one of the things we did. I was quite impressed with the deposits that were in Larrakai. They're quite big. I would estimate that at their thickest, they're probably up to about 10 or 20 meters thick at the thickest. At the coastline, they're probably only about 5 meters. The ones in Larrakai was still, in a sense, in volcanological term, we'll say they're still fluidized. They still have sufficient gas in them that even if they had already come down, they were still kind of moving. So you could see gas puffs going. You could see a little bit of movement on them because of the gas that's still in them. So that was interesting. And then the one in Roseau was also quite big, Roseau River, which is just south of Monron. But to me, the most impressive deposit was actually the one that was in the Wet Wallaby River. I think most people who go to the volcano know the Wet Wallaby River. Is that river that you have to walk across as you get to the trail on the western side. You know, you have to go across the Wallaby River, you get your foot wet, and you have to take off your shoes, put on your shoes, that kind of thing. But that whole river is now covered in pyroclastic flow deposits. So where you would normally walk is now land. And what has happened is that the river, because it's dumped so much stuff in the river has cut a channel a little bit further up and done a little diversion. So it's where the Wallaby traditionally is now slightly, there's now a little river slightly north of it where it's found a slightly different pathway to get to the sea. So that to me was impressive. I mean, I knew that it can come down Wallaby. I knew based on studying this area, what it can do, but to see it is different. At some point, we plan to go back at some point to collect, actually physically collect some samples, and working with other colleagues at seismic and overseas, we'll sort of look at, what the deposits had in it. That's important for us to understand how these things come down the valley. One of the things that we saw, which was, again, very interested in that, is that they were very fine grained, it seems. There's not a lot of big blocks in them. But the one in Wallabu particularly, or was it? I think it was Roseau. It had these big blocks at the top of it. So the thing is flat, right? So you have a flat sort of area. But on the top of it, you have these big blocks. And what happens is that when a pyroclastic flow comes down, because it has so much energy, because it's what we call fluidized, there's a lot of gas in it, it's rising things up, it's able to carry some big blocks. So I'm talking about a meter across, something sort of as wide as that, as high as that. But the deposit itself, the stuff that's carried, it is really very fine. It's like fine ash and dust. But when it's moving, it has so much energy that it basically they float along the way, they bounce along the way and come down. That was interesting. The second thing we did, which was very important, which Dr. Christopher did, was that we took, well, I think most Vincentians and most people in Chatsworth know him as TC, or the scientists, let's call him. But he took some measurements of this volcano. And that was significant, both because it's the first time it's been done at this volcano. It's not been done by anybody else. And also it's the first time we were able to successfully get it. Now, why that is important? Because the output of gases, as we've said before, is important in tracking what this volcano does. And what we hope to do over the next week or so is quickly build up a database to better characterize the output of gas. So for example, we would be able to say that at this time, this is the amount of gas that comes out. This is what this magma is doing at this point. And from other studies, determine that this is the kind of gas it should have in it. Now, if we suddenly see a drop-off or an increase in the amount, that will tell us something about what the volcano is doing. A drop-off could tell us that it's degassing a lot. It could tell us that it's plugging up. An increase could tell us that new magma is coming through. So the gas measurements that has now been successfully done, and we hope to replicate and do a lot more of. And eventually we hope to put in a permanent network along the coast, which TC is leading that effort to help to continue to look at gases. What that means, again, is that we have shown that the seismics, which is led by Rod here, as you know, we're part of a 3-man team here on the ground, supported by others at seismic. But the seismics help us to know what was happening prior to the eruption. As people would have realized from the reports that we have out, the ground deformation, the deformation of the ground, which I have told you could happen, the ground is now sort of shrinking, is depressing, which makes sense because the stuff has come out. It probably deformed before the eruption, the stuff came out, and now because the stuff has come out, it's now deforming slightly. That is showing us a signal, which is useful. It's telling us that those two monitoring elements can work in terms of detecting what the volcano is doing. And now we have a third element, which is the gas. It means that going forward, we're in a much better state as a monitoring agency for monitoring the volcano, because we have 3 independent sort of related data sets telling us 3 ways of looking at what the volcano is doing: the earthquakes, the ground deformation, and now the gas. And that's really great in terms of sort of tracking what is happening and what might happen in the future.
Okay, thank you. And Prime Minister, you want to...
No. I think you asked him about, Richie, about yesterday. But what about since then and this morning?
Today.
Yes.
Today. As most people would have realized, we said, I have to take responsibility. I said, to a large extent, based on what we saw, that it looked like we had been out of the period of having explosions. But of course, Soufriere don't like to be told what it's doing, so it proves me completely wrong. So this morning at about 16 minutes past 6, after 40, I think it's over 41 hours of doing essentially nothing. Well, not so much doing nothing. It was producing all these earthquakes, these hybrids, these long period earthquakes, which you remember the pattern was before. You had about 13 to 15 hours of these, and then you had something. Well, it didn't have anything for like 41 hours. So therefore, we kind of concluded that it looked like we're out of the period of explosions. And then this morning it's had one. It wasn't a sort of a big explosion compared to the ones that we had last weekend, but it was big enough to punch a hole through into the clouds and put an eruption plume that we estimate from here probably at its highest probably got up to about 7 or 8,000 meters. A lot of the ash at the top level, there was a little bit of ash at the top level drifting towards the east, but most of it to us from here looks like it was drifting towards the west, offshore. I'm not sure if people along the west coast might see that haze in the distance. I'm not sure if it might blow in, but it looked like it was going mainly to the west in terms of the amount of ash that came out. It wasn't a lot. It wasn't a sort of a big eruption column, and it didn't seem, the signal that we have, it's not a long signal. The height of the signal, the amplitude, size of it is probably comparable to some we have had, some of the volcanic explosions we had within sort of the last couple, sort of earlier on this week. Certainly on the 13th, we had one. It looks like it's smaller in magnitude than the one we had on the 13th that commemorated the 13th April event. But yes, we did have an explosive event, and it tells us that we're not quite out of the explosions. That, as we said, it looks like the period between the explosions have lengthened. It's now lengthened to over 41 hours, which is a bit more than two and a half days, kind of. So it looks like you might still have these events going on. Fortunately, they're not very big. Fortunately, they're not, and therefore not producing a lot of ash. So hopefully they shouldn't disrupt anything other than the northern parts of the island where the volcano is and where people should move from. But change that headline. We're not out of the explosive period yet, and we still could have explosions going forward. And I don't think I'll be saying that we're out of the explosive period for a little while now.
No, I know this morning when I was talking to you just before 6:15, you said to me, you got to call me back because we now having an event.
Yes,
but
I did.
On the basis of what you had said to me and said to the nation, I wasn't really too worried because you had indicated, among other things, that the energy was a little more sluggish, but you had emphasized, in fact, though, that we are not out of the woods and we must not go back into the area because it can still do unpredictable things.
Yeah.
You had said all that. This is why there was a headline in a publication which I saw, which seemed to have suggested that Seismic Research Center said that the show was over, and the only the show was over by the shouting. But that's not the case.
Well, I think hopefully people would realize that that's clearly not the case. I think the headline, unfortunately, misinterpreted largely something that was said in the advisory that we sent out. And essentially, what we were saying is that it looks like at this time, given the length of time, that we were out of the period of explosive activity at this point. But it went on further to say that explosive activity could pick up at some point in the future, and that, this is just a lull. In any case, we have always said that, yes, at this point, it looks like it was, as you said, it was, it had less energy, and we expected the length of time between each period of explosive activity to lengthen. Yesterday, we thought that it had gotten to the stage which we expected to get to at some point, where you wouldn't have any for a little while before you have a next one. So we said that, but we never said that it had finished. And even if, I think people need to understand, even if, say, we had a week of nothing happening and just earthquakes, that's the earthquakes that we have now, I don't think we'll say yet that it is finished, because for a number of reasons. Just bearing in mind historical reasons, right? Soufrière has always erupted for longer than a week. We just entered the first week here, so to say that it's finished in 2 weeks, that'll be very unusual. Secondly, the amount of energy that this volcano had at the beginning suggests to us that it has a lot more down there to come out. Thirdly, if you look at the amount of the amount of new material that has come out. I think we estimate, just back of the envelope sort of general estimates, the new material that has come out. I'm not talking about the 79 dome, which it got rid of, which was there before, or the effusive part of the eruption, the new dome that came out. I'm talking about truly new material that was in new magma, fresh. We estimate it's a small amount. It's only about 20 million cubic meters, if any, that has come out as fresh material. Now, if you look at past eruptions of Soufrière in 79 put out upwards of 60 million cubic meters of material. In 71, it put out something around that amount, 60 million. So past eruptions, which started less vigorous, have produced new material that was much more. So to think that now, when we have only had a small amount of new material put out that is finished, would be, I think we'll be totally wrong. So we have a little time yet. I mean, I know people would love it. I would love it to finish too. But the reality is that we will have to deal with this thing for a little while. It might be that the way in which we deal with it is by having to get accustomed to periodic explosions. I hope that is what it is, and explosions that produces ash that goes towards the coast, that goes off coast and drop the ash in the sea. We hope that, but there is no guarantee that would happen. At the very least, what's going to happen, even if it does that, is going to really damage and destroy a lot of the property and land on the volcano itself. One of the things that we saw when we went along the coast, we actually went from the national parks. The forests in the area from sort of the wet water boat and all the way up to Larakai has been damaged in a significant way. In some cases, it has been destroyed. Certainly, at the top of the volcano, it's more or less just there. That kind of damage, it will recover, but it will take some time. So even without us doing anything else other than the explosions that affect the north, it's going to have a tremendous effect on civilians, and people need to bear that in mind. We can live safely in the south. We just need to put things in place so we can deal with the ash and the inconvenience of the fact that it might affect us from time to time. Once we do that, find ways of sustaining life in the next, few weeks, probably months. We hope it's only months and not more than that. We should be okay. But we're still early days yet, people. This is the first week of an eruption that has clearly shown us that it has a lot of bangs still to go.
Now, in terms of the material, you emphasize new material, about 20 million
that's a
cubic
ballpark
meters.
figure, yes.
But all told, the old dome, I think you had said would have been in the region of close to 70 million cubic meters. Plus, we had the new dome, about 13 to 15 or thereabouts.
Yeah.
So you're basically looking at material which has been deposited here in the sea and over in Barbados and elsewhere in excess of 100 million cubic meters.
Yes, right. So that's correct. So when I say new material, I'm talking about excluding those other two and stuff that have now come out.
Yes.
And by the time we finish, I suspect that this is going to produce, in terms of new materials, the amount that it produces will probably be greater than what you had in 79. Because this eruption looks like it's bigger than, it's clearly bigger than 79. This eruption looks like it's closer in magnitude to 1902. And it's just gotten started. So it might be that it ends up, in terms of the areas and the amount of material it produces and the areas that affect, as I said, it's still going to be largely in the north, but its destructive potential is going to be probably bigger than or comparable to the 1902 eruption, which essentially damaged and destroyed places and properties in the entire northern one-third of the island, an area extending from Georgetown on the one end all the way across to Chateaubriand on the other side. Anything north of that was essentially destroyed in 1902. And when I say destroyed, I meant that trees, land, lots of material deposited. The place looked like it was bombed after the 1902. And that's the kind of thing that it's looking like it's going towards. It's not reached there yet. As I told you before, the eastern villages are still to a large extent intact. But I suspect that it would not necessarily be the case once we're finished with the eruption.
If I listened to you carefully and you said in 1979 you had an estimated outflow of material about 60 million cubic meters, and so far the new material which has come out is about 20. So and if you said this one is going to bring out, in your analysis, your prognosis, more than in 1979 in new material, that means that you have at least another 40 plus million cubic meters to come out.
Yes.
All right.
Quite a little ways to go still.
Yes.
That's it. That's the point. So
yes.
I don't think people, I mean, there might be possible then during reports coming up that we say that there's a lull or there's a pause. I don't think people should take that to mean that it's finished. It's still early days yet. And I mean, it's probably a good thing that we got this, we got it slightly wrong yesterday, because it shows how uncertain this thing is. It still seems to us that it's following a general pattern, but the details of that pattern might need a little tweaking as we go along. And therefore, people need to avoid, I think the main thing is that people need to stay out of those areas. They're still very high risk. There's still things in there that could kill you. And even though there's an interval between explosions, I don't think people should now start thinking that every time an explosion, you could try to get in during the gap, because the gap might change as it just did. And we're not exactly sure how it will change. There's certain margin of error that people need to understand with these systems that requires us to be very careful with how we respond to them.
May I ask something else too, Richie? Yeah. I saw a report. I didn't hear you myself, and I didn't hear what any quote-unquote United Kingdom scientist said. But I saw a report which suggested that it was being said that it is a possibility that this volcano can return to prehistoric condition. That is to say, to make St. Vincent a desert. Is that, what is this? I mean, I know a number of things coming out. Is this, for A, was that said or meant to be interpreted in that way? Or B, if there is a possibility, is it a fanciful possibility as distinct from a real one? Because when things are being said like this, we have to clarify.
Yeah. Yes, I mean, I think I have also said it too before, that soufre has ways of erupting that in prehistoric times was much more significant than now. And I think I've described some of the ways it's erupted. People saw the intense way it erupted in the early first couple of days of this eruption. Soufre has the capacity, from the rock record that we have, from looking at the deposits, to have periods like that extend for longer time. That is, that you have, and therefore the result of that is that you produce a lot of ash, and we know that ash is a problem if it gets excessive, as it is now. There's always, and there's never an absolute negative in the sense that we can say no, something like that or those kinds of eruptions can never happen again. But so far we're tracking the eruption, and so far we think that the most likely thing is for it to continue behaving like it's behaving now, which is similar to what it has behaved in the historic past. So the scale that we expect is one of that. And I've drawn the comparison with, it's looking like it's bigger than 79, it's closer to 1902. We don't see anything yet that tells us that it's heading to something different than that. And if anything, there's evidence given recent studies that it tends to have more frequent eruptions. In fact, up until this one, which is bigger than the last one, you would have thought that it looks like the more frequent eruptions were of lower magnitude. So 1902 was bigger than 1971 and then 1971 or 79. So you would have expected that this would be smaller, but it's now gone slightly bigger. So to answer your question in sort of in brief, is that there's no indication currently that soufre is heading towards a prehistoric scale kind of activity. It seems to be operating still within the parameters of what we expect it to do historically.
But if you even look at 1902, from what you said, that this is closer to 1902.
Yeah, that's
That
far. And I mean, as soon as we see any indication of that, we'll alert the public, alert the government.
yes.
And we don't see any indication of anything changing. So, I mean, I don't know why that was said. The context, it might be that the context in which it was said was taken out. One can speak about possible things from volcanoes. Volcanoes have things that are less likely, things that are most likely, and the actual thing that happened. So if the things that are less likely tend to be of a larger magnitude, the rare events, the things that are more likely tend to be things that are probably tend to be things that are probably a smaller magnitude than the rare events, which tend to be bigger. And maybe the person was describing what the possibilities were, and the journalist might have taken it as then saying that this is what it is in for. I don't know what it is, but
Okay.
I would have to see the context, and that's possibly the case.
Well, you know, Richie, when you explain things the way you do, and when I hear and read what Seismic Research Center says, I am moved in your own case, and I don't want you to be modest about this. Is that you're a greater, richer than the rest of the tribe, because it is. I'm borrowing from Shakespeare. It is invaluable scientific work you're doing for us and explaining it in layman's language. Occasionally, there may be a misunderstanding here or there, and that's why we need to correct them. Now, when you study
Yes.
volcanoes, and like you say, it's close to the 1902. As a scientist, a geologist, a seismologist, do you look also at the social and economic consequences historically following particular eruptions? Like, for instance, in 1902, where it appears, and I don't know whether your study is involved, is that the economy in the north, the northern one-third, was significantly altered, and the migration patterns, we saw a lot of people leaving the area and settling south. Of course, in the remainder of the 20th century, after things had settled down, people, the population increased and so on and so forth. Some people went back, but and naturally, the natural increase in population is this. And in 1979, we also saw migration. Clearly, people who had come into shelters, gone into homes, significant numbers stayed. Is that from the history of the eruptions? Is that the kind of pattern that you have seen? If you, in fact, as part of your formal study, study the socioeconomic and migratory patterns consequent upon eruptions.
Yeah, I mean, I've had, and Seismic has had many collaborations with colleagues, some great scientists overseas. And one of the things that, yes, you're correct. One of the things that we've looked at is not just the physical volcanology involved in processes regarding super, but one of the things that I'm interested in terms of from a research perspective, and colleagues in the UK at the University of East Anglia, at Bristol University, we have worked on looking at volcanism and how people deal with volcanoes in a sort of a rounded way, not just what the volcano does, but how people respond to them. So there's a lot of research that has gone on, through the oral tradition in the context of what people say about volcanoes, but also some of the things that you mentioned. And one of the things I'll tell you, you're correct. One of the things I'll tell you is that some of the settlement patterns in St. Vincent now, so where people live currently, is as a direct result of what happened in 1902. So I believe communities, and we did a project recently, and we actually brought that back to St. Vincent. We collaborated with NEMO and created an exhibition for St. Vincent. People like Professor Barkley in the UEA and various others in the UK. We worked on creating an exhibition which would give back to Vincentians the knowledge kind of that we had acquired. And one of the things I remember there's a graphic in it that shows you the settlements in St. Vincent in 1902, and there's a graphic that shows you where people went as a result, because the authorities then moved people, relocated people who were on the volcano to certain communities. And there's a graphic that shows you where certain villages are, where they are now. So for example, I'll tell you specifically. For example, the villages of places like Camden Park, Rosebank, a couple others like that were created actually because people had to move, and there were people who were resettled. So you could actually track that, and we actually have in the exhibition. I don't know if I suspect you haven't seen it.
I saw the exhibition.
Right. So to say that you're correct, because of what happened in 1929, in fact, what has happened at volcanoes and other hazards, people tend to have to move, and you could track it, and you could trace not just the migration patterns where they go, but also you could trace how St. Vincent's geography and where the settlement patterns are has been affected by what the volcano has done. Essentially, people have moved from the north, and some of the communities that you have in the south now, where could trace their origin from in the north, and it affected how people were evacuated in 79. A lot of the evacuation in the early days of 79 happened because people had relatives in the south and simply went to people who were living in the south had relatives in the north, and they simply got in the vehicle and went to the north, and that's how they a lot of the evacuation in the early days. Unlike this time where it was called and it was organized in a certain way. Last time at the beginning, the eruption started and people just started to move, and a lot of the movement was facilitated by relatives who went and got their relatives who were living in the north. So yes, it's happened, and it's one of the things that we look at, because to understand how people deal with volcanoes and to better sort of inform the advice and the information you provide. Persons like myself and other colleagues at the Seismic Center have looked at it in that kind of way, not just what the volcano is doing, which is straight science. Some of us are interested in that, but some of us are interested in it in a wider perspective.
I raise this, Richie, because as you would see already, my mind is turning towards the issue of recovery and reconstruction. And one obvious thing would be the physical infrastructure in relation, for instance, housing.
Yeah.
Because that is a matter which has to be given great thought as a consequence of our experiences, and there can be certain reconfiguration in certain communities as a result of the migration, and thus housing, health services, all kind of other things in areas which may have an influx of somewhat more persons.
Yeah. So I mean, to say that, I would say that there's historical precedent for certain kinds of actions that have been taken. Sometimes that help, sometimes not. So for example, the communities that were built up in places like Lomans and Camden Park, that's the names that come to head immediately. I think Clare Valley to a certain extent.
Sharps. A lot of people up in Sharps.
They were developed deliberately to house people who had to be relocated because of what the volcano was doing in 1902. So that has happened in St. Vincent throughout this history. That's not unusual. And I think people need to realize that this. Of course, what tends to happen here, is that if you give it a 20, 30 years, people forget that the volcano could do what it just did, and they go back. And so the problem repeats itself.
Yes.
Constantly. And I understand that it's difficult to move from where you grew up and where you're born. You have roots there. You don't ever want to move, but sometimes, you have to consider other factors. But people always constantly, because the pressure would always constantly go back into areas, go into areas that they probably, in hindsight, they should never live. But that's how it is.
Now, in relation to these briefings which we are having,
yes.
If we're going to have gaps of like 48 hours, if that is a pattern, probably we don't have to do anything.
Remember, that's a pattern for now. Eh?
I know it's a pattern for now.
Right. Yeah.
What I wanted to say is that
Yeah.
we probably don't have to do anything tomorrow morning and Sunday morning.
Yes, I agree. I think we could change the frequency.
But if Lady Sophia says, "Hey guys,
Yes.
the Richie and Ralph show has to go back on the road because there's something which has happened and which demands the immediate attention." So I just wanted to raise that and ask.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I think we, as I'm here as part of a team that providing advice and to you as the head of the government, but also to inform people about what we do. We have a great education outreach team that produce products all the time. But one of the things that we do, and I'm not doing it by accident because I'm the lead, but that's a deliberate strategy where we ensure that people know as much as they can about the hazard that they deal with, so that when decisions have to be taken, both at the individual level, at a community and a government level, they can be better informed. So we're always here, whether it's me or somebody else, lead of the team, will always be here to talk. So you might have to change the name from a Richie and Ralph from a Richie and Ralph to a Ralph and TC or a Ralph and
No, I would always put the seismologist first.
yes. Oh, okay, right.
Always put the seismologist first.
Show, right, of course. Yes. So that's
No,
fine. Whoever is here will be willing to
yes,
continue the briefs.
but tell me this, Richie, how you got back your pipe-borne water?
Well, unfortunately not, but there's been a lot of movement in that regard. Braxa, again, have to make them up. So we have tank and it's will be filled today. But pipeline is not there yet, so we are still struggling with that. But there's been movement in a particular direction, which is quite positive.
I don't know if any question has come in on WhatsApp.
Yes.
For Richie.
Yes, there are two questions, Professor Robertson.
Yes.
Someone is reporting that they saw a satellite image with a hotspot at Walilabu. Is that indicating that a dome may be forming in that area? And the second question is, the age of the volcano, does this have anything to do with the quantity of the material it is producing at this time?
It's interesting. I mean, the questions have become very sophisticated, man. I have to start reading up a lot more to get prepared for them. But the first one, seriously, the first one, the Wallabu, that would be interesting. I haven't heard that, but the Wallabu hot springs is an area where volcanic gases come through. These are gases that, it's mainly water vapor, but as the hot material below the surface is there, it heats up the ground around it, and the groundwater interacts with it, and it comes back up, bringing some of the volcanic gases, but dominantly water. Now, it would make sense, given what is happening at the top. As I said, what is happening at the top is related to the fact that magma, hot material, has risen up and is now erupting. If you think of it conceptually, it means, therefore, that the hot material is closer to where Wallabu is. So it would make sense that Wallabu should be hotter, because the source that is heating it is right next to it now, while before it was deep beneath the surface. So we haven't heard that. I hope it is a satellite image, because we would love to go and check it out, but we can't, because, a pyroclastic flow came down Wallabu, so now Wallabu is no man's land. We can't. So I would have to see the image, because it could be indicative of the fact that the Wallabu is now hotter than it was before. It is not indicative of the fact that the Wallabu is going to have a dome. The volcano now has an open crater, and that's the easiest place for it to come out, and that's where it's going to come out. It's not going to come out on its side. That's very unlikely. It could be that the pyroclastic deposit that came down the other day, and the several that came down, remember I was saying that it's still hot. Mm-hmm. And what tends to happen with these hot deposits is that they remain hot for a long time, first of all, and I must warn people who might be thinking of going and seeing them. They remain hot for a long time. So you might be walking on the surface of them. And if you don't know what you're doing, you will be walking the wrong place, and your foot will sink in. And you will feel the heat down below, because it's hot down below. Often they are what we call fluid ice. So they tend to feel very soft at the top. And therefore your foot, when you walk into it, your foot will go straight through. And when your foot goes through, it will then pass through the cooler layers that have been cooled and reach the hotter layers. So don't go walking on them. So I digress. So if it's still hot, you could think that in the water boot there is first of all the water boot, which might be hot in any case. But if there is a hot deposit there, it's possible that it could then generate enough heat that you would, in fact, there were periods when we were seeing steam venting in the rivers because the hot water that was there was being flashed to steam by the hot deposit. So you might have little vents. In fact, some of the deposits sometimes have little vents, and they actually have little explosions in the deposits because it's so hot when the water is confined, you can have a little steam explosion. I'm sorry for being so long-winded, but that was the first question.
Right.
The second question was whether or not, because of the volcano being so old, that has something to do with the amount of material. Not really. The age of the volcano, if it's older, it probably has created more material in its history because it had a longer time to go. But the fact that it's older doesn't mean that it's going to produce more material now. It's been producing material at a certain rate all the time. And within recent times, as we said, the scale of eruptions are like 1979 as one level, and then 1902 is another level, and then 1812 and 1718 are different levels. So that's the kind of scale that it has. That has nothing to do with the fact that it's older or its length of time it's been around. That doesn't affect directly the rate at which or the quantity of material that comes out at this present eruption. What comes out now is related to how much magma is gas rich. We try to track monitoring the volcano is to try to determine A, if that gas rich magma has exhausted all its gas and therefore all its energy, and B, if there's a new batch coming through to add to that to keep it going.
Sorry, you have other questions?
Well, it's not so much a question, but I know Professor Robertson was saying earlier on that he got it wrong, and it looks like he wanted to, But you have so many fans online, Dr. Professor Robertson, that everyone is saying that one out of 100 is still.
No, but the point is this. The point is this. He's just been very modest because he had said that what he's saying is on the current pattern, that it could be a little longer because the last occasion, and you're saying that the next time we may get one is late into last night.
Right.
Well, it came in the morning.
Right.
Sorry, Richie, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'd like to say something. You say I'm being modest and stuff, but I'd like to tell people something, and it's very important. You see me in the morning, and I speak to people, and yes, I come from an old man we used to say he had the gift of the gab. My wife told me I have the gift of the gab, which means I could talk, right? And therefore I could say things properly. But I just need people to understand that I am just the front face currently of an organization that consists of some great people who do some great work. And the reason that I could do what I'm doing is because I have a seismologist here as part of the team who is fantastic in interpreting the signals, that I have a gas specialist here who's also a volcanologist who we banter about what we're seeing and what we're doing, and he helped to refine what we think about it. And then we have a team back in Seismic that is producing some fantastic work in terms of education outreach, who's supporting fully, getting satellite data, getting the ground deformation stuff. The tracking of the dome was done by Dr. Stinton, who's based in Montserrat. So we have a team that supports I'm just on the head, so I can't take the credit for what you're saying. So I'm not being modest. I'm just
Richie, what you just said there, I'm going to make them love you more because there's an 80-year-old lady who sent me a message and said, "I love my prime minister, but I must tell you, I also love Richie." So I just and they're asking Richie, this lady, who has texted me, "Can you please ask if we can eat the vegetables and fruits that ashes fell on?" I don't know if that is within your expertise.
You should wash it. Yeah, you've got the person who tell you. The stuff that you have, once you wash the ash off, it's fine. You don't want the ash. You don't want to ingest. It's not going to kill if you eat the ash, but it's just going to end up you being in the toilet, picking it out, because it's not going to stay in your body. So you should wash it. Once you wash it, it's good. But I actually agricultural person, actually a medical person. I'm not a medical.
I know, but they're asking you every question. No, you
Right.
know,
They,
no.
they believe in the science of
Well,
Professor Robertson.
I think it getting a bit ridiculous now, honestly. Yeah, I'd like them to back off a little bit, you know. I don't know everything. And I'm part of a big team, a strong team, a fantastic group of people who just do some great work and don't get it chance. So,
I am sure
yeah.
that TC and Brother Stewart, they must be ribbing you.
Of course, they do that all the time.
They
But
ribbing
sometimes they're
you.
not making it easier.
They ribbing you. No, 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 no,
Yes.
no. Well, that's good, man. Is there anything there, Dion?
I think, Prime Minister, basically we can, Professor Robertson, I know he has quite a lot on
Yes,
his hand,
yes.
and
Yeah.
if anything, we will check in
Well,
with
he
him.
gave us
immediately.
more time this
Yes,
morning than
yes.
usual, and we want to thank him.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very
All right,
much.
Professor.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Now, we need to get Garth
Yes,
to give us
we're organizing that
and ask
process.
Simone if she can stand by, and also ask
Forbes.
Michelle.
Yes, we've alerted
Now,
all parties.
I want to ask the persons who are in shelters that bear in mind that and you know you have moved from your home. Gat is here?
Okay, yes,
Gat
we
is,
have
yes.
Gat on the
Hello.
line.
Yes, Gat. We
Hello,
want
good
an
morning.
we
Good
want an
morning.
update on water.
Quick update, yes. Okay, PM, we will start with the achievements that we had yesterday because we are following on what I indicated we were planning yesterday. We were successful in a couple of areas. First of all, the South River spring that we activated was actually used and by members in the community. We were unfortunately faced with a setback because some of the pipeline infrastructure, was not integrated with the new Jennings infrastructure. So we found that we had to do some extra pipeline work, which we shelved because we felt we should focus more on the Jennings. So as we stand now, the South River spring source is available to residents in that locale, and it's not able to be stretched down the road as we had originally planned.
Okay.
But that should be alleviated later today because hopefully we'll have our Jennings system back up. And we'll also have trucks in that area going up to the higher areas. Dr. Smith and Dundo Hole and all those areas would be supplied during the day with trucks. The Jennings system, we did some significant cleaning at the Jennings system. We partially cleaned one section of the plant, and we were able to put water into the sedimentation tanks and also onto the filters because we have a little more sophisticated treatment plant. So the raw water quality demanded that we do some treatment before distribution. So that was in progress, was put in place overnight, and we should have water coming into the system, into the storage tank sometime later this morning and be able to distribute, certainly by this afternoon.
That will reach for the listeners. Jennings would reach where? What you're doing at Jennings will reach where?
Jennings normally would reach as far as Diamond Estate in the south.
Yes.
Diamond Industrial Estate, normally. But because of the severity of the shortfall that we've experienced, we have all the tanks to fill up along the way in all the villages. So the persons at the extremities would take a while before they get their full supply back. But certainly the closer you are to Byra, the quicker you would receive your water supply.
So in broadly speaking, what time you think, approximately, when you think we might get Jennings back to Diamond?
Jennings would be back to Diamond, I would think, maybe by tomorrow.
Okay. What about on more elevated areas? Because you mentioned Dr. Smith village in Park Hill, done the whole area. More elevated areas.
Yeah.
Would the Jennings be getting to them today?
I think maybe sometime tonight or maybe tomorrow, because we'll have to get that system, the tank filled so that we can pump water up as we normally do.
Yes.
You know? So that will take a while to normalize.
Pump water up to the 50,000 gallon tank
Yes,
above Dr. Smith.
Dr. Smith, yes.
Well, what about as you come down inland, where you're dealing with villages like Diamond, Chapman's,
Yes,
Lowman's,
right.
Greg's, you coming down into South Windward, dealing with places like New Prospect, Simon, you called all those inland areas, Upper Stubbs, Victoria Village.
Gradual restoration. All those areas will be a gradual restoration. Because remember, I want to remind the public, we are not pumping. This is a gravity-fed system. So it has to build up on its own steam. So that is what will happen. So we will get the storage tanks hopefully filled overnight and be able to distribute more tomorrow. But certainly we'll get water in the line at the low elevation before the end of the day.
Okay.
And
in all those inland areas which I've mentioned,
yes.
do we have enough capacity through CWSA to take the water in whether in tanks, in trucks, whatever, into those inland villages, because many of them are patched?
Yes, we will do more of that today. Yes, we have a list and we've been endeavoring to do that. So we'll continue that truck-borne distribution today. So.
No. Let me ask this. Now, on the leeward side, how are we doing at Hermitage?
Well, all right. As I indicated earlier, actually, no. I spoke to you. The Hermitage system is back on, and we know it's reliable because the 500,000 gallon storage tank at Belle Isle is almost half filled now, and we are presently distributing water into Barley and to the highest point in Peter's Hope, where we have that housing scheme. And the shelter at the Barley Secondary School is also receiving water.
Central Leeward Secondary School. They have pipe-borne water there now.
Central Leeward, yes.
Okay, well, that's
so we made some significant progress.
I'm very concerned that we have done done that to Barley. So the whole of Barley, which would mean acres, all the elevations.
Yes, over the curtains as well. Yes.
Okay, fine.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so.
All right.
That was
the other systems, are they all operational? Those?
Yes, they are all operational, and I'm sure listeners would attest to this. However, the Montreal system, which normally is supported by the Jennings system, is being stretched right now, so very often we would interlink Jennings and Montreal, but Jennings is now no longer available to assist Montreal. So Montreal is being stretched. So we have to be diverting water to different communities during the day. So the Eastern George has been severely hit. But we are looking at ways to give them some water in between during the day until the Jennings system is back up.
No, but let me understand you. Take, for instance, the water. I know I went to the shelter yesterday at up in Fair Hall. They had water in the pipes. That came from the one at Dalloway.
Yes, Fair Hall is from Dalloway.
Okay. Now,
so in the CARICOM area, there's a mixture of water from Montreal. It could be Jennings, Dalloway, and Majorca.
I'm concerned. I'm concerned about some places which hadn't been receiving. Let us say Belvedere,
yes.
Brighton. Are we going to stretch the Montreal one to give them some?
Yes, we did that overnight. We did that overnight, so they got some water overnight. But
did you stretch it? Did you stretch it to Diamond also?
I'm not sure if Diamond got. I know Stubbs had, but we will, during the day today. That's the area I said that is being fed solely from the Montreal source and not from the support that it normally gets from the Jennings system.
Yes. Why I come back to Diamond is that there are a couple of the dirt roads in Diamond where the housing infrastructure has been built up, and maybe the water vehicles haven't gone on some of those dirt roads. So I'm wondering if CWSA can bear that in mind in their distribution.
Yes, well, yes.
I mean, I know they will be. It's good news for them that tomorrow morning they would expect water in the pipe from what you said, barring something happen. But
yes,
but today it would be
today we will
good.
continue. Yes, yeah. The truck-borne effort again would be solidified again, would be intensified. Sorry, and we will push into that south windward area, the Eastern George south windward area.
Because a lot of tanks. A lot of the tanks have come in, and some also coming in tomorrow. But some, and so is it a question of not enough vehicles?
I am not sure about that. I think we have vehicles.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, I think we have enough vehicles.
Okay,
yeah.
I think there's a WhatsApp question.
Well, Prime Minister, inclusive of the commander of our Coast Guard, Brenton Keane, Stubbs, Rathamil, Prospect, Belvedere, Harmony Hall, all of those areas are said they've been out like for 7 days now.
Didn't Harmony Hall get?
Harmony Hall has been out. No, Harmony Hall has been out. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, but Stubbs had water up to yesterday and the day before.
What is being reported is that they got some from a truck, but none is in the tap. And some persons are raising the issues that one message is communicated, but they don't have tap water.
So it may not be back to all areas in Stubbs. That's the point. As I mentioned, it's a gravity-fed system.
Yes.
So not all areas. Persons are accustomed to.
I think you must explain. I think you must explain that there's a gravity-fed system and there's an electrically pumped system.
Yes.
But ours is wholly gravity-fed.
Wholly gravity-fed.
Meaning what? That the water, first of all, the intake has to be at a higher level than where where your location is. Otherwise, it has to be pumped. That's one factor.
Yes. The issue is.
And then the volume in the tank.
Well, the volume and the level in the tank. But more importantly, it's a gravity-fed system, so the lower areas would always receive water first. And for the higher areas, it's almost like you're filling a glass. The persons at the rim of the glass would not get water until the glass comes right up. So that's the gravity-fed system for you. And it's not like persons are accustomed to Vincent can switch water on in Eastern George and everybody gets electricity instantaneously. It's not so with water. The water in our system has to flow, it has to pressurize and get to higher elevation.
Well, I'm getting a text message from Brighton, and they didn't have any in the tap.
Yeah. Stubbs hasn't had any for a while, and
no, I'm not.
No, we know. No,
I'm not. I'm not putting.
You are repeating what we know and what I said.
Yes.
I said that those areas are stressed and they are without water.
Yes.
What we are hoping to do is to get the Jennings system back on to supplement the Montreal system.
okay.
So all what you are saying, Dion, we know all of that already.
But but
yes.
So Montreal, the extent of Montreal, the stretching of Montreal, can't reach all those places.
It can't reach all those places. We have to divert. We have to shift. We have to shift to different areas until Jennings gets back on.
What is the size of Montreal relative to Jennings?
Oh, Montreal is about, in terms of its supply and reach, is about half of the Jennings system.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. So
well, we're supposed to be getting in some water today again. In the meanwhile, so you have.
Yeah, I understand that ship. Yes.
So we
in the harbor. Yeah.
So it means that you have to be doing significant trucking.
Yes.
Now, what about the security in the distribution of the water? Have you had challenges?
Well, we CWSA per se not having challenges, but I've been hearing stories about persons, and that's the problem. We NEMO CWSA, we really have no final control over where the water goes. We can send a truck into an area, but maybe it doesn't get to its intended destination because persons along the way may short stop the truck, and it's difficult to pass persons who are requiring water. But certainly, with the increasing efforts that we have in getting pipe-borne water, we hope to alleviate all of that, in a day or two. So that's a continuing story since we started.
But you say
are
you saying that as of now, the restorative work which you did at Jennings, is there any service being done as yet in the pipe from Jennings?
No, not yet.
Not yet. You're waiting until later today until you sort out your quality controls and all that.
Yes.
Okay. I just want to know because
the quality controls and the treatment. Yes.
Because I'm quite sure that my home village, somebody is going to call me, or text me and so on.
Messages are there from your home village.
Okay. Well, okay, but that's the clarification. So in the use of the water from the Connery River, they can take the water there to flush the toilet and so on, and maybe and bathe, but they need to boil if they're going to do anything for drinking.
Yes, we spoke about that yesterday. Yes,
okay.
We need that proviso to be out there. That persons, once they use the water, they will have to have that in place.
All right then.
Yeah.
Thanks, God, and I want to thank you and all your team. So Brian is up in Jennings again today.
Yes, yes.
So I send greetings to him and all the workers.
We are all over. Yes, the CWSA workers. I received the thanks on their behalf, and I'm sure they're listening.
Well, as you'd have heard Richie Robertson, Professor Robertson.
Yeah.
You don't want to be frightened. The workers don't want to be frightened that anything untoward is going to happen to them during the course of the day, according to the science.
Yes. Well, I braved it into the center of the island yesterday, and I wasn't afraid. I was,
Yes.
I'm just a little concerned about the level of ash, though, in the north, in that Barley and northwards.
Yes.
It's something that we have to be concerned about going forward, and we must remind the public that we're still vulnerable. If we have further ash fall, if we have heavy rain, it could still compromise the quality of the water.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We understand that, and it's good to remind us of that.
And that's why we still have to store water, not because the water comes back. In your pipe, you still have to keep water stored because we are going into the hurricane season just now. We have a volcano erupting, and we're in the middle of the dry season too. A lot of persons seem to have forgotten that as well. So it's important that we remind ourselves that we should be very frugal in the use of water, very conservative, and only use water for essential domestic services.
I also want to ask Gat that persons in the communities, when whether it's a vehicle with one of these big 600 or 800 gallon water containers, or whether it's a water truck itself, if it comes into a particular part of the village and it's there, I would advise that you try to get to it, because it may not a village would tend to have a lower part, a middle part, and an upper part. It would be good. We all have to cooperate with one another in this difficult time. So you don't say, well, it comes to the middle and the people in the lower part go up to the middle, but those at the top, the thing ain't come up there. But make an effort to
Yes, and sometimes the terrain of the terrain and the design of the road does not allow that size of vehicle to get into all corners. So
the other thing too is that if you have I know there have been some pickups carrying or some smaller vehicles carrying water, the black water tanks, the containers. I would suspect that anything over 800 gallons
Would be a challenge.
could make it
Yes.
top over. If you go to 1,000,
Oh, yes.
it can even top over the vehicle.
Yes, it's very dangerous. I personally would not advise over 500 gallons for those pickups
Well,
or
I believe there have been some 800
yeah, yeah. But that's risky. That's risky,
in the
especially with our terrain.
circumstances. Yes,
Yes.
yes. I don't know how many, but I believe there may have been 1 or 2 800s going.
Yes.
Mr. Saunders, I have a question for you. Are there any plans for the disposal of the water bottles other than in the garbage?
Well, I spoke with our solid waste manager, Winsworth Pow, and he has prepared, he's preparing a document, because what we find is that with the influx of bottled water, we are going to have a significant amount, Mr. PM, of a significant amount of plastic bottles.
Yes,
So we
and
will have to find a way at the landfill to separate these, because I don't think we can encourage separation of source at the
Yes.
shelters. We would like them to put them in separate bags so that we can collect
Yes.
them separately. Because that is an issue.
Gat, we deliberated on this on a policy standpoint in relation to the fiscal side, the tax side. Because we want people to bring in the water and to bring in the bottled water, given the shortage. We suspended the bottle levy too, so you don't have the resources to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
But
I
we still have to do it, Mr. PM, because at the landfill we would prefer, because we have all island recycling, a business that gets into the re-export of these plastic bottles. If we can have them separated, both at source and at our landfill, then we can have them take the bottles out of the country rather than have them inserted in our landfill, because they go nowhere once they're in the landfill. And there's value to it.
Yes, and I'm getting messages about, well, we know Dominica sending a lot of water, Guyana, some are coming up from Trinidad, St. Lucia, the vessel, the Venezuelan vessel has gone there. I understand that you had gotten about nearly 50,000 gallons pumped out of the vessel yesterday.
Yeah.
I see the Coca-Cola Foundation, their company bringing, I don't know what size of containers, but they say 7 containers of water for the Red Cross and so on and so forth. So I want to thank all of those persons who are supporting in this way, because we will still need to have this kind of support, because, as you rightly said, the water system, though it's coming back bit by bit, it's still unstable.
Yes, it's still vulnerable and unstable.
Yes.
And the issue too, the bottled water is good in the shelters because it promotes better public health, better hygiene.
Yes.
Because to be transferring water from bucket to container and so on, there's always the risk of contamination.
Absolutely.
So it's always good to have the bottled water in any event.
I'm wondering if we can try and get Simone Keyser Beats. Thank you very much, Gat, and I appreciate. No, I was saying earlier when Gat, just like I ask persons when they come in with water, people cooperate. The overwhelming majority of the evacuees in the shelters are cooperating very well with the shelter managers. You have a little dissonance here and there, and I'm also asking the people who are managing to have great sensitivity in all the circumstances.
Prime Minister, we've got CMO, Dr. Keyser Beach online. Good morning, Dr. Keyser.
Hi, good morning. Good morning, PM.
Simone, the COVID situation and the primary healthcare, public healthcare system.
Okay, so this morning we recorded one new case last night of 62, so 1.6% positivity rate. In terms of following through with the contact tracing of those 3 cases in the shelters yesterday, so far we have had negative tests for all of the contacts. We also did some massive testing at NEMO yesterday at the NEOC, and all of those persons were negative. We are continuing to do our testing. We are expanding the testing in the shelters, and the testing strategy is now going to be about 15% every 5 days. In terms of the primary health care systems within the shelters. We're trying to integrate the shelters into each health district. So the doctors and nurses who were displaced from the red and yellow zones, they have been assigned to the clinics, and we are looking at running more doctor clinics in each district to allow for the persons in shelters, whether it's the public shelters or the private homes, to have increased access to health care. We're also going into the shelters, and we're now looking, besides looking at the communicable diseases like, the gastro or fever, cough and cold, COVID, we are also looking at the nutritional aspect, and also for our persons with diabetes and hypertension. So we're going to have our nutrition officers, our community nutrition officers, working along with our nurses and doctors and the shelter teams to ensure that we have adequate nutrition and that we are maintaining healthy diets as possible.
Now, when I went to, and this is not only the one where I went to yesterday, the shelter. I've been to several, and something which is recurring is a problem of persons who are diabetic. In many cases, the meals would come an hour or so later than they will normally have their meals if they were at home.
Yes.
So if they would have their meals at 12 o'clock, their meals would come 1:30. And to put it in local language, by that time, they get very antsy because their blood levels are adversely affected. Sugar levels, in the blood. Is there some way where we can build in for in a shelter? Let us say we have a shelter for 100 persons. You may have 15 people who have diabetes.
Yes.
If we can say we have, whether, I don't know, some kind of little snack, a biscuit or something. I don't know what it is. The nutritionist would know.
Yeah, they will do that.
So that, but we need to get that to them, because we have had no death. We have had no serious injury as a consequence of evacuation with the volcano. It would be terrible if, for instance, for whatever reason, somebody get a diabetic coma or whatever it is. I don't know. Can we? I know it's 7 days and we can't fine tune everything. Is there a plan in place, or is there a program actively where we are fine tuning that to help with the persons who are diabetic and hypertensive?
So the original the original national disaster plan, we had included our advice from our nutrition unit in terms of the diets that should to be used in the shelters. Just as in hospitals, we normally offer snacks. I know some of the shelters, they were offering snacks. So we're going to ensure that we provide the advice to allow for appropriate snacks to be available for those diabetics. So as you said, we would identify the diabetics, hypertensive, those who have kidney problems, all of these are the special requirement diets. So we have community nutrition officers, and they will be added to the health teams to ensure that persons are adequately taken care of with their special needs, to make sure those snacks are available and that they are appropriate snacks.
That would be very, very helpful. I know that when we begin the shelters, we have all these things with the plans and so forth.
Yes, the implementation.
But your concern of getting people their mattresses, their cots, their beds, and so on and so forth, and making sure the food is there and people are reasonably comfortable and all the rest of it, they get water. But as the days go by, and because this is going to get a longer, we as we heard from Professor Robertson, we really don't know how long this is going to be, and there may be lulls of significant periods, but still, the volcano has the potential to be acting up at any time, if not at the same level as hitherto, but to create enough challenge for us that we can't get back into our homes in the red or orange zones in any time particularly soon. So that it would be very good for us to have this fine-tuned properly. Maybe somebody on the shelter team should be given the particular responsibility to be able to identify these persons. Well, they should have the data.
Yeah, they do have the data in terms of, so it will be a matter now of when the health team, and so the health team includes the pharmacists, everybody.
Yes.
And when we go into the shelters, this is we know we are looking for particular individuals and to ensure that this is what is happening. But at the same time, we really want to encourage persons, even if you are living in a shelter at this point, to utilize the clinics that are all within, walking distance to everybody, because all of the clinics out of the affected zones, all of them are functional. And we would have additional staff too.
How often the health team goes into a shelter, say, they may go today, but they may not go tomorrow or the next day?
They are supposed to be there each day.
Each day, okay. All right.
They might not be able to look at every person, but the process is that you communicate with the shelter manager or the person in charge of the shelter at that point, understanding that if there was a problem overnight or during the day, it should have been reported to that, and then they can direct. So this is what we are aiming to do to ensure that every shelter has some contact with a healthcare person, whether it's a nurse or an EHO, pharmacist, so that we know what's happening and we're tracking, we're doing the surveillance. We're getting some more support from CARICOM and PAHO virtually in terms of getting these systems up and running and fine-tuning them for this particular situation of COVID plus a volcanic eruption.
Okay. Now, what is the in among the nurses and the medical staff, the health personnel, are we doing our testing still for COVID and things are okay there with those persons?
Yes, so within the staff, we are doing the testing. Quite a bit of our healthcare workers have been vaccinated now. We've increased that. In terms of the active testing for COVID in the shelters, as I said, that is increasing and going to be ramped up from next week. I'm not sure if that was what you were going at, PM.
Yes.
Yeah. The other thing I wanted to mention is in terms of dialysis and oncology services. We are moving towards...
Oncology being cancer services?
Yes, the chemotherapy, so we're moving towards identifying an alternative public site. Besides MCMH, Milton Keyton, where we have 5 dialysis chairs and we have some oncology capacity, we're looking towards establishing another site where we can really beef up and get back up to the numbers we are accustomed to and provide these services. And partnering with the private public will continue.
Now, let me ask this. Yesterday, I know that there were 7 police officers who had been tested on the rapid as positive, either yesterday or the day before. Have they been retested, and what are the results?
We got back negative. We read them and they were negative.
Okay.
But I'm just discussing with Dr. Francis Murray because there seems to have been some confusion as to the reporting on those. So I'm just going to double check all of those. But so, as of now, the latest thing is that there was.
Now, are we having placed on the primary health care system problems which we cannot cope with, the normal kind of problems in the primary health care system, or are we coping?
I would prefer to wait until we have the proper complete surveillance on that, but basic day-to-day things like basic immunization for vaccine preventable diseases, the basic diabetes and hypertension, because of the displacement, those are things that we have to ramp up in terms of screening and control. So I would.
In terms of surgeries,
Oh, you mean?
are we in terms of surgeries now? Are we doing electives?
We are not doing general electives. So if you have an urgency, we are doing those. We have continued our outpatient clinics at the Milk and Teacle Memorial Hospital, which is, normally we would shut those down, but those have not been shut down. We brought down our staff from Modern Medical, and we are going to establish additional outpatient clinics in some of the facilities and continue the surgeries and so on.
Do we need support to come from outside to strengthen our surgical team so that in addition to the emergency surgeries that we can do electives, or that is not necessary?
No, because the any limitation on the surgeries would be because we were keeping the space in case we had increased admission.
Okay.
So it's not that
it's not technical personnel.
No,
okay.
That's not it.
All right, good.
That's
fine.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks very much, Simone.
Thank you.
And thanks, Dr. Keyser. We got
welcome.
through yesterday with that additional information that we questioned you about. So,
okay.
Yes, thank you.
All right. And we can wash the tomatoes and the lettuce and eat it.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Okay. Well, interestingly, Richie is now the go-to man for all sort of things.
And he gave the right answer.
Yeah, he gave the right answer.
That's right.
Thank you very much, Dr.
Right,
Keyser. Have a good one.
And if Michelle is there, we can.
We're getting her now, Prime Minister. So we're getting her now for you. Prime Minister, there are some questions.
Yes.
Quite a lot of questions that persons are asking you this morning. So while we wait for Ms. Forbes, there is one in particular which was sent since yesterday in anticipation of your program today. Let me just get that for you. As regards to the students scheduled to write CXC exams in June, have any arrangements been made to accommodate them, and what's the way forward?
I think there's some reassessment, so that's a work in progress, and we'll get some information. In other words, there's no change, but there may well be a change.
Okay.
So we have to await.
Okay. We've got Michelle Forbes, Director of NEMA, on the line. Good morning, Forbes. How are you?
Hi, good morning, John. Good morning, all.
Michelle, I'm not going to ask you about numbers either in shelters or in private accommodation or those who are in guest houses and so forth, because there are a lot of reporting, particularly from those in the private houses and those who went into guest houses by themselves and so on. But I think we can fairly say that the numbers who are the 4,000 odd numbers which are in the shelters, that you have more than those in private accommodation. We can at least say that.
Yes, and it's climbing as the data comes in.
And the data comes. Yes, that's why I say that. Now, how are we going? How are we coping? What are our challenges? What are some of the things which we have to do better? What you're going to advise? You're going to give persons, everybody in the shelters, out of the shelters, etc. And how is the organization coping?
Okay, we are coping. We have to expand and find more space in terms of operating. We recognize that this event is not one of the usual small events. We right now are creating additional space for Emergency Operations Center right across the road, where we have different agencies working. We have increased our number of lines that we can actually reach out to persons, and persons can reach out to us. So those are being broadcasted today, where we actually have a hotline team, a telephone team just working on reaching persons who would have even been displaced from this particular eruption.
And we have good persons to operate those lines, people with patience and apply their heart to wisdom. Okay.
Yes, mainly civil servants who have been volunteering to the office of the Chief Personnel Officer.
Very good.
We are using a lot of civil servants who volunteer.
Very good.
Our main activities will be still the distribution of food packages and a lot of the relief items that are coming in, because we don't want the ports to be blocked up, because we have quite a bit coming in.
Yes.
So we are heavily concentrating on clearing those things and getting them from the port, so they can be packaged or directly to the communities and the emergency shelters that need them. And we have a separate packaging for the those families that are staying in private homes.
Now, we clearly have to increase the capacity to deal with the packaging for private homes,
Yes.
because the numbers, as you say, are climbing. When we give the food in the private homes, this is food for them to cook.
Yes.
We give for what, a week, 2 weeks at any
A
one
week.
time?
A week generally. And we want to increase it to 2 weeks packages.
Okay.
To reduce the, yeah.
No, I know that from the very beginning we had Michelle a policy that persons with particular qualifying criteria, we can put them in guest houses and even in hotels. That is to say, people who are elderly and who are incapacitated, people who have some sort of kind of disabilities, pregnant women, especially those in late pregnancy, and the like. Have we been having a challenge that other than those categories, that there are persons generally who telling you that they want to go into a hotel or a guest house?
Yes, yes, we actually have that challenge. Additionally, there are persons who would have actually signed into a guest house, and of course, they only paid for a couple of days, and then they're asked to continue to stay in the guest houses. That is one of the challenges that we have.
But that's not part of the policy.
No, that's not part of the policy.
The policy is that there are shelters, and that the criteria for us to support you, for the state to support you in a guest house or hotel, the criteria are well laid down.
Yes, yes.
And we should probably publish those again, so that persons will know that you can't. A young, strong person can't just walk off the road and go inside a hotel, say that they're an evacuee, and that expect the government to pay for their hotel. And similarly, there are persons who have gone into private homes, not who have gone into private homes, who have rented homes or rented apartments, and now want the government to pay, but that is not part of the policy either.
No, it isn't.
And the decision to put a person in a guest house or in a hotel, we have an approved list of guest houses and hotels.
Yes, we have an approved list, and those who would joined and indicated they would go according to the conditions that the government laid out.
And agreed upon with the hoteliers or the guest house people.
Yes, yeah.
And there is a cap which they have agreed to in relation to charges.
Yes.
All right. I think those things are important because there are some persons who feel that they can just check into a hotel and say they're evacuees and or who have done so and then realizing that they don't have the resources, or they may have the resources but want the government to take care of that. Let me ask this too. The conditions are really related to your physical situation, your health situation, your age, disabilities, like talk about the pregnant women, late stage, some with very, very small children.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't go towards your quote-unquote employment status, that if you're a teacher or you're a public servant or you're something, that somehow you're too good to go into a shelter and therefore government must pay for you to go inside of a hotel or a guest house. Huh? It's not
No.
it's not in
No, it's
accordance
not like that.
with your
No, it's not
occupational
accordance.
status. Good.
No.
I want us to, well, we should publish those criteria again, or draw people's attention to them. Now, in relation to the shelter managers and the team, we know that they're all very dedicated and doing good work, and they can become overwhelmed from time to time. Because it's not easy, and they have to leave their families. They work in long hours, and the like. Just as a matter for public information, were these health managers did they go undergo particular training in the run up to all of this?
Yes, we trained about 200 shelter managers in January, February, March before this event, before we had the explosive eruption. We were doing that in partnership with the Ministry of Education. So we trained about 200 shelter managers, and also with the SVG Red Cross. So and shelter management training is ongoing. So we would have done it virtually with the shelter managers.
Okay. All right. Is there anything else you want to tell us?
No, just we just continue to work with all the population that have been displaced, and we continue to make things a little better as each day go by.
Fox, just before you go, I saw a message earlier on. I think when that someone is indicating, because things appear to be quote unquote quiet at this time, if they can run in inverted commas to one of the areas they've moved from to grab some stuff and come back.
They'll be doing that entirely at their own risk. I would not encourage anybody to go on their own like that. They should check in with us before, because we are in contact with the scientists, and we will have a general window. But if we cannot keep in touch with you, it becomes even more difficult. What we are doing with the key agencies that need to go and do a few things, and we just go and peek to speak, because we have started our preliminary damage assessment at beginning today with Trucidema and our regional partners and our local partners also. Those we will let them know when they can go and what time and how far they can go. But if you think you can just run in and you don't have any contact with us or have approval to go in, because all approvals to enter into the restricted zones should come to the National Emergency Operations Center, because we are in contact with the scientists, and we'll be able to give you a general idea of if you can go, what you can do and what you can't do, but not blanket like that. So you'll basically be doing it at your own risk if you do that.
Okay, thank you very much, Michelle. I want to say to the people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, yesterday we had a very fruitful meeting of the heads of government of CARICOM, where we did a lot of coordinating work. Daily, I'm doing the work in relation to individuals who are from NGOs globally, regionally, and from all our developmental partners and bilateral work with governments, addressing not only the current relief, humanitarian relief now, but also the recovery and reconstruction. The issue of the ash. Very early, I asked the United Nations representative for Barbados and the Eastern Caribbean, Didier Trubuck, to secure for us the technical personnel and equipment and all associated tools, machinery, everything which may be required for the addressing of the ash problem. And a team has been assembled of experts, and they are doing a lot of work virtually. Didier is coming in tomorrow. He's taking a boat from Barbados today, a vessel. And we are going to have a meeting, hopefully on Saturday afternoon, evening. And on Monday, sometime in the morning, we intend to launch a global appeal, for resources. Our missions are working very hard, and as we do our work, other people are contacting us. So it's a two-way process, and I just want to say that I don't want to go through all of the details. I haven't gotten the word. I'll find out from Julian later today. I don't know if he's on to tell us what is happening at the airport. Because yesterday he told us definitely it wouldn't happen on Saturday, and he was trying to source some equipment to do certain things, and that would be helpful that people would know about. There are a number of messages which I've been receiving about water here or there, people wanting food who are in individual homes and the like, but we have a process dealing with that. I just want to give the assurances. I think that is basically all. I mean, we have been at it for an hour and 40 minutes, and I have to go on and get some things. I have some things to do from 10 o'clock. Well, just before 10, actually. Julian is on?
Yes, please, Prime Minister.
Hi, Julian.
Hey, Chief.
I'm using you to wind up.
Okay.
Tell us about the airport.
Okay, we continuing. We got another sweeper out of Canoan yesterday, a replacement front sweeper, and the work on the runway is progressing. I don't know how far they got to last night, but I'll go out there midday and see where they are. I engaged another contractor for the front of the airport. So the parking lot, the road network, start scraping, washing, cleaning around there. That was initiated yesterday and starting today. That's basically where we are.
No.
I still haven't, no luck with additional equipment out of Trinidad. I just came off the phone. I'm going to make another call now.
Well, thanks very much. And I know a lot of stuff coming in, and you're dealing with all the logistics.
Yes.
Right. I forgot to ask Michelle about this. There are a number of places who are looking for, who we still need some more mattresses, because the numbers have been added to certain areas. We have a lot of cots, but some persons can go on cots, some can go on the sleeping mats, but some also, given all their personal circumstances, need to have
well, I'm told that
mattress.
there's another 500 mattresses supposed to be coming out of Trinidad.
Okay, very good. I raised that because I know you had told me that.
Yes.
All right then.
So I'm following up those matters this morning.
Thanks very much, Julian. And because I know you're busy, you have to do your work.
Yes, boss.
All right.
Thanks.
If I could just say this. Good morning, PM. Harmony Hall has water in the pipes currently. This is from somebody who I'm trying to check to see who is this from. Anyway, that is what I'm told from persons out there. Okay? So that's good news. The security situation, the commissioner reported to me this morning early again that the security situation in the last 24 hours has been in order, that the person who had been involved in the homicide, that they got the individual, they got the gun, the person has, well, let me say they have the person. Let me not go into more than that. Whom they consider, whom they would be charging for that particular homicide. We're tightening and strengthening the security situation, and we are asking and making the appeal to everyone to just be orderly, just be disciplined, just be calm. I'm just asking that. We are going to be in a difficult period, and we are indeed in a difficult and challenging period. And in 6 weeks' time, we're going to have the start of the hurricane season. So there are multiple challenges coming on all fronts for which we have got to have preparation for. I want to say something which I've said before to our people. I've said it to nations across the world. I've said it in multiple interviews for radio and television across the world. And our message has gone out. Important as we require resources and technical support for the humanitarian effort and for the recovery and reconstruction, as important as all those things are, coming to us from the region and outside, and from our own resources too, of vital importance currently and in our rebuilding and to build back stronger is something which is called social solidarity. We must be in solidarity with one another. If this solidarity is frayed, F-R-A-Y-E-D, or shattered or broken or dissolved in any significant way, it is going to make the issue of the current humanitarian relief very problematic, and we are not going to be able to recover and rehabilitate and reconstruct in the most optimal fashion, which means that we have to be our brothers and sisters' keeper. We have to be disciplined. We have to have good neighborly love. The dissension, we have to cut it out. The misrepresentations, we have to cut it out. We have to get rid of the vanity of small differences. It used to be said that someone who does not read a newspaper is uninformed. But if the person reads a newspaper, he or she is misinformed. Now, what we are having with the explosion on the various platforms on the internet is not just misinformation, but a lot of fake information, deliberately contrived lies, and fake news. I want to ask our people to listen to the authoritative sources. A release comes out, read it carefully. Public officials make statements. Just be careful in how you're interpreting what is being said. Don't, for the sake of circulation or for likes or whatever, give it some spin. All you're doing is that you're making it more problematic in the maintenance of an ongoing social solidarity. Let us be constructive. There's a friend of mine who called me. She had taken in some people in the homes, and she began the conversation with me like this. She said, you know, I have a complaint about Nemo. I said, don't tell me the complaint about Nemo. Tell me the problem you have and how we must solve it. And then when I was finished, she said, you know, Comrade Ralph, you have a good point there. And she recognized it. We have to be very slow with just complaints for the sake of making complaints. We identify the problem and we solve the problem. The people in Nemo are doing tremendous work. The work is not perfect. It is a real challenging situation. But I think that thus far, we as a people, as a whole country, can feel that our social solidarity together have kept us going, and facilities and measures have been put in place to keep us functioning in a civilized manner despite the terrible events associated with the volcano and naturally with COVID. Thank you until Monday morning. God bless. Monday morning, I may not be here because I may have to do a speech at the Security Council. I will try and fine-tune the time. If not, somebody else will be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us for another program. Keeping an eye on Lasso Frere, the daytime edition. Thanks so much to Star FM Hot 97.1, We FM Magic Radio, Boom, Extreme. We're also heard live on UWI TV, IKTV,